So, as Muslims, we believe that the Quran is preserved, right? So, we know that from the time of the Prophet, the scripture hasn't been changed. Well, my question is to you is, how do we know the Bible has not been changed? Because for me, that would be like
through
the turning
through
point.
manuscript traditions and through oral traditions.
Um, could you explain that a bit further? Because I don't really understand how that would prove it's preserved.
So we also have this thing called apostolic succession too, right? But manuscript traditions would just simply be like the written traditions or the writings that we have of the manuscripts, the writings that have been copied down over and over and over and over again, which are all consistent with one another. And then you also have oral traditions, like through the church, where you have these people who quote things orally, who teach us things orally, and through that we preserve the scriptures, and through that we preserve our teachings.
So, would you believe that you believe that the Bible's been preserved, yeah, to date?
No, say that again. Sorry, I'm sorry. Say that again. I was
Okay.
just
Would you believe you believe the Bible has been preserved to date, right?
yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's fine. And okay, my other question was, you know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Why did the New Testament come after the Old Testament? If you
Because
guys accept, if you guys accept both, yeah.
The New Testament is the continuation of the Old Testament. It's the
But
fulfillment of it. You see,
yeah,
like Christ in
you know the difference between the Old Testament and New. If you
because
guys
the New
accept, if
Testament
you
is
guys accept both, yeah.
talking about the Old Testament and saying that the Old Testament scriptures prophesy and speak about or to get rid of what was in the Old Testament, but to fulfill it and to bring it to its completion. So the Old Testament is a foreshadowing, and these foreshadowings are fulfilled in the New Testament or continued in the New Testament.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't the New Testament doesn't it have laws that aren't the same as the Old Testament, which go against it?
They don't go against it. They're completed and they no longer apply to us. The Old Testament laws, because Christ brings
Mhm.
them to their fullness
Yeah.
and to their completion, they no longer apply to us. So we are under the covenant of Christ, or we are under the law of Christ now. We're no longer under the laws that were there in the Old Testament. We're under Christ's law.
Oh, okay, okay. Alright,
Yeah,
that makes sense, I guess. The other question was, to me, it was the Trinity. Do you believe in the Trinity?
I do, yeah.
Um, so one thing that obviously didn't really sit right with me was, you know how like you believe that God is all powerful, all
I
knowing,
do.
and so on. These things that define God. Um,
Yeah,
if Jesus came down in a human form, um, for example, in human form, he wouldn't be self-sufficient the way God would be self-sufficient. So
that'd be
wouldn't
wrong.
that? So he would be self-sufficient.
Yeah, he remains
Um,
self-sufficient and he remains
so,
independent.
when he was a man,
Mhm.
so when he was born a baby, did his mother not have to feed him,
He
etc?
did, but that's in virtue of his human nature. So when we say things about Christ, we can say certain things about him in
Mm,
different respects, right? When I say that Christ is like growing up or he like goes from the age of 2 to the age of 10,
yeah,
that's going to be in virtue of the human nature, not in virtue of the divine nature, because obviously we agree that divinity does not grow. Divinity is infinite.
yeah.
So he's not going to be growing in virtue of his divinity. The person grows in virtue of the human nature that he assumes.
Okay, yeah.
So
So
it's him and
yeah,
his human nature that's doing it, not his divine.
yeah. So I understand that. So we know that obviously. So you're saying the divine nature is what is perfect. That is what is perfect. But
Both natures are perfect. The human nature is perfected by virtue of God touching the human nature. This meaning that he takes on human nature, and whatever God assumes, the thing that he assumes is going to be perfected by God because he is the source of all, like he is the source of perfection and he is the source of all goodness.
so you would say that Jesus, even in his human nature, was perfect.
Yes.
Perfect the way God is perfect.
Yes.
Um, but okay, this is what sort of like sways me away. In his human nature, like for example, you're able to die. Like you're you're dependent on other things. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Just being able to die and being like dependent on certain things does not take away from your perfection. When I speak of
Oh,
perfection, I'm literally saying that Christ is free from all like imperfections and
it,
cannot sin.
well, oh no, that's not what I mean. I mean like perfection in terms of a creation. Like okay, not a creation, but you know how God is perfect, as in he's known of everything. Okay, that's actually a good one. So you
I
know how?
believe that even Christ in his human nature knows all things as well.
Isn't there? But I thought he didn't know the hour.
That's not talking about knowledge. That's talking about declarative
Mm.
knowledge or knowledge that's revealed. The context helps you understand that. Matthew 25, Jesus helps you understand why he's not talking about knowledge in your mind, but knowledge that's being revealed. Because he
Mhm.
says in Matthew 25, he compares it to a Galilean wedding. He compares the hour to a Galilean wedding. And traditionally, in those weddings, the son who's being married and the father of the son who's being married, the father is the one who's in the position of declaring or making known the time of the hour of the son's wedding, but it's not the son. But even though both of them have knowledge of the hour.
Okay, I'm gonna look into that as well. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And to be honest, yeah, you kind of sort of answered the question.
Okay.
I think I'll let someone else come up. But thank you.
All right.
Have a good
Thank you
day.
for coming on, man. God bless you. Hmm?